Before we talk Thunderbolts, how burned are you by Brave New World? For me, I realized that despite loving Sam, I had no interest in seeing that film again. And while I'm not burned out, I look at my rearview mirror and I see more Marvel fans that I'd like who've decided to pull their fandom over to the side of the road. We, the audience, used to give a movie bonus points for being a Marvel movie. We loved the through lines like Nick Fury, the returning characters, and the Easter eggs, and those mid and end credits which alluded to something bigger that would actually, shock horror, pay off. But where are we now with Marvel? After a very spotty fourth and fifth phase that included a fire hose of questionable content on Disney+, I feel those bonus points have sort of turned into a Marvel tax. There's no solid through lines, and now instead of Nick Fury, we only have Wong and Valentina Allegra De Fontaine turning up in more than 2 movies. And Thunderbolts, which is the end of Phase 5, is the first movie in either Phase 4 or 5 to finally pay off an end credits scene. Which scene? Well, it's no wonder we can't remember, because it was the end credits from Black Widow, the very first Phase 4 movie. That is 1 out of 12 end credit sequences from Phase 4 and Phase 5 that has actually had a payoff. The through line has definitely been cut. And me, my Marvel fandom is still chugging along, but my pedal is definitely not on the metal. But I look at the Thunderbolts and I think about that end credit scene, and I find myself asking one question. Do I care? And for someone who lives and breathes superheroes, hell, who even draws them every day, that is a brutal question. But this is where I think I'm at. And to be honest, there's a ton I don't care about in this movie. But when I gave it some more thought, I think there is one character that I definitely do care about, and another that I'm actually ridiculously curious about. 2 reasons for me to do the unthinkable and actually peel my butt away from my drawing desk and plan for a couple hours in a movie cinema. But first, let me welcome you to the panel where we look at the world through the frame of the comic book. My name is Jason Badower. I'm a comic book writer and artist for DC Comics, as well as a bunch of Marvel Studios films. The only thing that Marvel cares about is their characters. And for me, it's more about what those emotions of those characters evoke in me. But I'm going to go through them from the ones that I don't care about to the ones that I think are really interesting. In the battle of who could care less, first up is Taskmaster. Do I care? Taskmaster is without a doubt the worst comic-to-screen adaptation of a character since Hawkeye.
I'm Clint.
I don't care.
In fact, let me just let my buddy Scott Stuart, who owns every single issue of the Avengers as well as almost every issue of Iron Man, explain to you why I love Taskmaster in the comics.
The Taskmaster is one of the coolest, strangest characters ever conceived and ever running around as your villain of the week in everybody's story once in a while. He's a mimic, a physical mimic, and so anybody's fighting style that he sees, he instantly knows it and can mimic it.
He would have Cap's shield and a sword. He has Hawkeye's bow. He has Daredevil's batons because he's fought them all and mimicked all their fighting styles.
He speaks like a dock worker, and he's a mercenary, and he's bloody awesome. He had a fun run as an under-the-thumb draftee into some of the more criminal-filled versions of Thunderbolts. But apart from the ability mimicry, no connective tissue to the MCU. Taskmaster, so much personality, so much verb just dribbled away.
I do not care about the gender swap. I don't care that Taskmaster is now a woman. It's the attitude that was the fun of Taskmaster. He's a blue-collar guy fighting superheroes. He's funny and he was real. And if you ever get a chance to read that Gail Simone run with him and Deadpool, it is absolutely magic. We lost a great character because they wanted to give us a robot-like Terminator. I want to see if she's still an operative and if they can bang some sort of personality onto those bones. Next up, by Ant-Man's asinine antagonists, Ghost. Do I care? Scott, who is Ghost in the comics?
The Ghost is a technological foe of Iron Man, largely. Many of Iron Man's foes were saboteurs and industrial spies and hackers, and Ghost had a suit of armor that allowed him to become intangible and walk through walls, and so he would be hired to walk through walls and steal corporate secrets, and who has better corporate secrets than good old Stark Enterprises?
In the MCU, Ghost is a lady that is unstable, allowing her to walk through walls, but she also needs quantum energy to survive. In Ant-Man and the Wasp, she tried to kill Janet to get that quantum energy that she needed. But I really want to know, who is she when she's not fighting for her survival? I would really like to see some sort of personality beyond that. Do I care at this stage? No. By Putin's Poontang, Red Guardian. Do I care?
The Red Guardian first appeared in Avengers 46. There have been numerous Red Guardians, but the conceit has always been he's the Soviet Union's answer to Captain America.
Look, I like David Harbour. I think he's a lot of fun. I think it was really great in Stranger Things. And as for an overweight, middle-aged white guy who gets to play a whole bunch of action roles, he's got to be living his absolutely best life. And I really see that in every one of his performances. When you see him as Red Guardian in Black Widow, the guy's having just so much fun. But it's also one note, and he's sort of just chewing scenery like bubblegum. And I'm just like, can they hammer any meat onto the character? Will he just be the joke going through it? But my big thing is, will there be any sort of redemption to this character? Next up, Valentina Allegra De Fontaine. Do I care? Sort of. Maybe. I mean, her portrayal by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, that is a whole lot of hyphenated names, is great. But the biggest difference in the comics is the Jim Steranko created character is not quirky. Not in any way. We are talking absolute femme fatale. If you're old enough, Emma Peel, she's absolutely channeling that sort of energy.
In the comics, she was a sexy European aristocratic super spy who was the love interest and compatriot at the top of S.H.I.E.L.D. with Nicholas Fury.
But like Fury before her, she's trying to assemble a team, and my main driver for this character is just why. I don't really care about her, but I do care about what she's doing and why she's doing it.
In Wakanda Forever, she has a sizable role in that, and it's revealed that she's the ex-wife of Martin Freeman's Everett K. Ross, and very much not a fan of him siding with the Wakandans and feeding them information during the plot of that movie, and arrests ex-hubby at the end of that movie, prompting the Wakandans to break him out.
The US agent, John Walker. Do I care? Scott, who is John Walker in the comics?
During the early 80s, Steve Englehart put Captain America through his paces and introduced him to a more modern, more cynical, Watergate-influenced vision of American democracy. And Cap resigned. And they brought in a replacement, John Walker, who, much the US agent we saw in the Falcon and Winter Soldier series, wasn't quite able to live up to Steve's legacy and made him a little bit nuts. And since Steve ousted him and resumed the role, he took on the mantle of US agent, and it's an angry meathead version of Captain America. For those of you who've seen Captain America, the First Avenger, Tommy Lee Jones wants a typical handsome quarterback-looking dude to have the super soldier serum, and US agent is, what if we actually did give it to a guy like that, and why it wouldn't work, and a dark reflection of Steve, but who also went on to have his own adventures and largely redeem himself. He's mostly a good guy with rough edges, a good guy who nobody else much likes.
I absolutely believe that this is a really brilliant adaptation, because while they've not just taken the character off the page, they've also taken the way we feel about the character on the page. This is a story definitely of redemption. And I'm really curious to see whether John Walker gets his time in the sun and what that actually looks like for him. People have sacrificed themselves so that he can step into the boots of being a hero. And I know he has genuinely great motivation. And I want to see what that looks like for him and if that is actually going to get paid off. What does heroism look like for the US agent? By Scarlett Johansson's roast beef sandwich, the Black Widow, Yelena Belova. Do I care?
She is a fellow graduate of the Red Room Female Assassin Training Academy, and after being freed from the Red Room's control, took it upon herself to free all of her sisters around the world, and has been either doing that or hunting Hawkeye, who she blamed for Natasha's death.
And that comes to a head in the Hawkeye TV series. And we are really talking about a character that is right now without a mission. And so I'm very curious to see what will be her call to action. What will define her as the new Black Widow? Because we always saw the last Black Widow was very much trying to get the red out of her ledger. What is going to be the new Black Widow's legacy, and how will she take Scarlett Johansson's legacy forward to the next level? Again, I'm curious. Do I care? Maybe. I care more about Florence Pugh than I do care about Yelena Belova at this stage. So let's get down to it. By my vibranium left ball, Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier. Do I care? TLDR, yes, I think Bucky is one of the few through lines that has actually been in the majority of the Avengers movies, and now possibly more screen time than any of our main heroes all put together. I'm really shocked by how much I've grown to love Bucky Barnes over the years, and especially, I can't stress it, I'm going to say it again, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. He was briefly in Brave New World. All you need to know is that he's trying to run for Congress, or is a congressman. Why? I don't know, in a brief cameo. His relationship with Steve Rogers defined Captain America's first 3 movies. In the first Avenger, it was established. In the second one, you saw that Steve will not give up on his friend. And in Civil War, you get to see how far Steve will go, including Steve tearing down everything that he'd ever built. The Avengers, all his relationships and friendships to stand by his one friend. We do not have any great romances that run through the course of the MCU. I mean, what, Pepper Potts and Stark's on again, off again thing. Look, I get that those two characters are together, but I don't feel it as any sort of relationship. But Bucky and Cap, I'm not shipping anything here. I'm talking about a bromance. This is a genuine platonic friendship that has moved through all these movies, and it, I think, is really the underlying relationship of the Marvel Universe. And Bucky now is on a journey. What does that relationship look like now that Steve is gone? And we even saw in Endgame how Steve even chooses somebody else to step into his shoes because he knows that his friend needs a Captain America in his life. That's another reason why Bucky couldn't have been Captain America. Bucky needs Captain America. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which I love. I thought that is an incredibly important slice of Bucky's history as he comes to terms with what he's done before and is trying to make amends. And also the greatest line in it that I think sums up Bucky, and the reason why when Sam gives up the shield and Bucky is so hostile towards him in that decision, and Sam's just like, what's going on? And Bucky says to him,
so maybe he was wrong about you, and if he was wrong about you, then he was wrong about me.
And as we've seen all those previous movies where Steve doubled down, tripled down on his relationship with Bucky, believing that his friend was in there and could come back, suddenly came crashing down in that. And I think Bucky, more than anybody, still feels the weight of what he did while he was brainwashed as the Winter Soldier, as an assassin, and is trying to work through that. What does that look like for Bucky? What does Bucky's future look like now? I think with Sebastian Stan's time in the sun, with his acting nominations, I think it's potentially going to be really, really interesting, and they can push him more and more forward. There's a character with such enormous backstory and such fantastic history. They can really write some new, fascinating stuff for this character. How will Bucky move forward with this relationship, with a new Captain America, with the world around him? What does his level of redemption look like? And I think this is one of those stories that can really powerfully move forward the MCU in a way that takes us from the earlier phases through from phase 5 and now into the potential phase 6. Bucky Barnes. Do I care? Hell yeah. Let's get into the character that I'm most curious about. We're definitely going to get into spoiler territory if you read the comic books, but I'm not going to spoil it for you if you do not know anything. All you need to know is that Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, used to talk about Black Adam being introduced into the DC universe as changing the hierarchy of power. In Thunderbolts, they are introducing a character that makes Captain Marvel look like Hawkeye. I am so curious to see how they're going to manage that, how they're going to resolve it, and how they're going to actually settle that idea into the entirety of the MCU. We're now going to go into spoiler territories and talk about who that character actually is. So please jump to this timestamp or the next chapter section. From now on, we're going to be redacting that character's name as we move through the rest of the video. But for this bit, spoilers, yo. Let's talk about the Superman dressed elephant in the room. Let's talk about the Sentry. Robert Reynolds. Bob Reynolds. Who is the Sentry, Scott?
Don't remember. And neither does anybody else. And that is how we meet the Sentry, as a bumbling, relapsing alcoholic with mental problems. And he discovers that he used to be the Golden Guardian, the man with the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns, the light of the Marvel Universe, friend of the Hulk, best friend of Reed Richards, a man who a photograph of earned Peter Parker a Pulitzer. Say that 6 times fast. And for reasons he can't remember, nobody remembers him. His history in the Marvel Universe was wiped. And as the story goes on, he debuted in a 5-issue limited series, culminating with the big reveal that the Sentry's nemesis, who's been scared of returning all this time, returns. And it turns out, wow. Spoilers probably for Thunderbolts, people. The Void and the Sentry are one and the same. And Bob has a schizophrenic personality and is his own supervillain. The Sentry is certainly a unique additive that wouldn't have been my first thought if I sat down and thought, what are we going to do with Red Guardian, US Agent, Ghost, and Taskmaster?
It's again my concern, because in Captain America Brave New World, instead of creating a new Hydra or a new Cap villain or a new Cap organization for Sam to fight, they went with the Red Hulk. And it's like, that's a cool idea, but why would you not save that for a movie where the Hulk could appear?
I'm so confused.
These are confusing times.
It just seemed like a great story. And again, the Sentry is a great Marvel story, as is the Red Hulk. But I just didn't feel that the Red Hulk was the right story for Sam Wilson at the time. And I think it really took a lot of the wind out of his sails. And I'm worried about that. Wakanda Forever is another example of a movie that didn't create an antagonist that the main character needed. You could have had a very interesting geopolitical thriller of countries trying to steal vibranium off the Wakandans with their own super agents, their own Black Panther equivalents, and instead we got shuffled off into this sort of pocket conflict of Namor or Namor off in their own little world together, and the rest of the world just ceased to exist. And I'm very worried that these characters who are very grounded are also going to be pulled out of the real world, and it's just going to be this sort of little pocket conflict that occurs that doesn't have any sort of ramifications. It doesn't seem to be the case given what I've seen of the trailers, but I'm worried that it will just not be the story that these characters need.
It's a collection of the espionage adjacent characters. One thing about the history of the Marvel Comics universe is that it's always been ghettoized. Your street level characters would all interact in this corner, usually around Hell's Kitchen, funnily enough, and your Avengers characters would interact in this corner around Central Park and Avengers Mansion, and your Fantastic Four would operate by themselves in central Manhattan, and the cosmic stuff would happen off in space, so along with Jim Starlin's brain. And this is the espionage-y, super soldiery side of the MCU, all coming together, and or what's left of it anyway, all coming together for what I'm hoping will be a good couple of heists. Ant-Man and the Wasp, which gave us Ghost, is a sequel to a sleeper, really fun MCU entry, which was a superhero heist movie. And I'm hoping we get a bit of that formula, as well as the Dirty Dozen, can they coexist team dynamic.
Another similar parallel that I was thinking of is that we've only really seen Marvel roll out one other team before, and it was crazy successful with the Guardians of the Galaxy. And suddenly James Gunn comes along and creates this fantastic team of characters. I'm a little worried that we're not going to get that because we don't have that same sort of vision holding all of these characters together. But on the other hand, I think we also have far more established characters, whereas at the time, we didn't know who Rocket was, who Groot was. There was a tremendous amount of legwork done by Gunn and all the actors and everybody involved in those movies to create those characters on the screen and make us fall in love with them for the very first time. The Thunderbolts, most of them are pretty well known to us. Bucky's been in almost every Marvel movie there has been. He's so ubiquitous, an absolute thread from all the Avengers and the sub-Avengers films that I think by pulling him into the Thunderbolts does create that Avengers adjacent idea that I really do hope that they do go with the far more espionage take. So it's not, oh, do we get the Thunderbolts or do we get the Avengers? I really hope they are two different teams for two different purposes so their stories do not overlap at all.
You can have cunning plans and traps as opposed to hulks and brute force. If they give the team a sort of Ocean's 11 type dynamic where it's all these wacky people with working to a purpose together, but it bouncing off each other with different personalities, and it's not a Scooby-Doo reveal where we find out that US agent has been plotting to have them all killed at the end or something ridiculous like that. Give the team itself a personality that is a uni-mind of the personalities that go into it. And I think you can get some real chemistry and mileage out of that, get a film franchise out of that.
At the end of the day, there are two reasons why I'm going to go see this film. Bucky, and then the other character that we just spoke about. Really curious to see how they do that. The big thing that I'm very, very curious about is I want to see some genuine emotion evoked in me from these characters. Believe me, I walk into these movies with my heart in my sleeve. I want to care. I want to cry. I want to go back to where Cap jumped onto the grenade. I want to go back to Yinsen's speech to Stark in the cave. I want Thor's moment where he fails to pick up the hammer again. Or the Guardians, where, hey, now we're all standing up. I want to be moved. It is shocking to me that the most emotionally sincere movie that Marvel has put out in recent years is Deadpool and Wolverine. I still get to the end of that movie, and I'm tearing up from that crescendo. That cinematic ride that Sean Levy and Ryan Reynolds put together for us still gets me every time. That just shows you how low level of cynicism I am. I want redemptions to feel earned. I want them to feel painful. And I want them to really wring every last drop of the emotional potential out of these characters. So do I care enough to see the Thunderbolts? Yeah, I do. The big question is, will I care after? I have to say, I was a little intimidated putting out my thoughts before the movie because within a few hours I'm going to go see it and find out what I actually did think. But on the other hand, I thought it'd be interesting to sort of sum up my thoughts going into the movie and Scott's thoughts going into the movie. And maybe either of those ideas resonate with you or somebody else out there. At the end of the day, more people on the planet are going to have not seen the movie than have going to have seen the movie. So stay tuned to see what I think after I'm going to do a review, which will be a cinema stream or skip review video. Subscribe to get notified of that. Please hit that like button if you dig what we're doing, or if you dug what we did, and if you just agree with absolutely anything, even just one idea, just please hit that like button. That's how needy we are, and more importantly, how needy the algorithm is to keep this channel going, which I'm just so incredibly proud of. Please check out my graphic novel, Joker Harley Criminal Sanity. It is a forensically accurate take on the Joker and Harley Quinn. Head over to lindsaysterling.com and grab my graphic novel Artemis that I wrote and art directed with Lindsay Sterling. In the meantime, there are tons of videos that I've done. Speaking of Deadpool and Wolverine earlier, we did a deep dive into Deadpool and Wolverine with some essays into both of those characters that I'm really proud of. Look, I hope you saw Thunderbolts and you loved it. How close are we to the mark? What did you think? I'd love to hear what you thought down below. And if you love the movie, don't let anyone take it away from you. In the meantime, look after yourself. If you can, look after somebody else. And I'll see you in the funny pages.